His full name is Cordozar Broadus Jr. The planet knows him as Snoop Dogg. And if you think that name conjures only one image, the Long Beach rapper with the braids, the lowrider, the slow drawl that somehow made every sentence sound like a Sunday afternoon, then you have only seen the surface. Because beneath that surface, and quietly running parallel to it for over 30 years, is something the entertainment industry did not fully anticipate: a business empire, a family structure built with intention and held together through circumstances that would have shattered less committed people. A real estate portfolio spread across Southern California, a brand presence that in 2026 extends from cannabis to media to food to sports ownership, touching industries that have nothing to do with rap music and everything to do with strategic positioning. From stage presence to business presence, Snoop Dogg's real wealth is diversified. We will look at the homes and ventures that keep family first and empire second. This is not the story of a rapper who got rich. This is the story of a man who got smart, quietly, consistently, and with a patience that the music industry does not typically associate with a man wearing a football jersey and holding a microphone. This is the inside of Snoop Dogg's private world, and it is bigger than the music by a significant margin. Long Beach made him. He never forgot it. Cordozar Broadus Jr. was born on October the 20th, 1971, in Long Beach, California. Long Beach, in the early 1970s, was a city shaped by contradictions, working-class neighborhoods with genuine community bonds pressed up against the economic pressures and territorial tensions that would, by the 1980s, produce some of the most intense gang activity in Southern California history. Snoop grew up in that environment, with his feet on two sides of a very sharp line. On one side was music, gospel in the church with his family, rhythm and blues on the radio, the emerging sound of West Coast hip-hop building itself in real time in the neighborhoods around him. On the other side was the street, the Rollin' 20 Crips, with whom he became associated as a teenager, arrests beginning at age 18. A cycle of trouble and consequence that could have closed every door before any of them had a chance to open. What opened the door instead was a tape, a homemade rap recording that found its way to Dr. Dre. Dre was in the process of building what would become Death Row Records, and when he heard the voice on that tape, the unhurried delivery, the melodic instinct, the ability to make menace sound like music, he moved immediately. In 1992, Snoop Dogg appeared on Dr. Snone, Dre's The Chronic. His verse on Nuthin' But a G Thing introduced him to a mainstream audience that had not been prepared for what it was hearing. The following year, Doggystyle arrived. It sold 800,000 copies in its first week. It has sold over 21 million copies in total. It remains one of the best-selling debut albums in the history of recorded music. Long Beach had produced something it had not fully expected, and Snoop, even as the fame arrived at a velocity that disorients most people, permanently never entirely left. Shante Broadus, the woman who built the foundation. If there is a single figure in Snoop Dogg's life whose contribution to his long-term stability and success is most consistently underestimated by the public, it is his wife, Shante Taylor Broadus. They grew up together, literally. Shante and Snoop attended Polytechnic High School in Long Beach at the same time. They were high school sweethearts. They married for the first time in 1997, the same year that Snoop's career was operating at a level of cultural dominance that creates more personal destruction than most people survive. The marriage hit severe turbulence. In 2004, Snoop filed for divorce. The separation lasted. And then, in a move that surprised the entertainment industry and confirmed something important about the depth of what these two people actually had, they remarried on January the 12th, 2008. The ceremony was held at the Rancho Palos Verdes estate, with their children present. It was not a publicity event. It was a recommitment, deliberate, private in spirit, even when photographed, and rooted in a history that no amount of fame or money could manufacture. Shante Broadus holds a master's degree in communications from California State University. Dominguez Hills earned in 2015 as a wife and mother and the operational anchor of a family whose public face is one of the most recognized on the planet. She has been involved in business decisions, brand management, and family financial planning in ways that go largely unacknowledged in the cultural conversation about Snoop's success. LinkedIn commentators and business analysts who have examined Snoop's trajectory have pointed directly to Shante as the stabilizing force behind a career that should have imploded multiple times and instead compounded. That is not a minor contribution. That is an architect operating without a byline. 4 children and a family built to last. Snoop Dogg and Shante are the parents of 3 children together. Their oldest son, Cordozar Broadus, was born in 1994. Cordell Broadus, known as Spank, arrived in 1997. Their daughter, Cordozar Broadus, was born in 1999. Cord has followed his father into creative work, music, media, and advocacy. In 2019, he experienced the devastating loss of his son, Kai, Snoop's grandson, who died just 10 days after birth. Snoop's public response to that grief was one of the most humanizing moments of his public life, unguarded, honest, and deeply parental in a way that recontextualized everything else about his public persona. Cordell pursued a football career, playing at UCLA before stepping away from the sport, a decision he explained publicly as rooted in his own mental health and authenticity. Choosing himself over the expectations of an industry and a family name that could have kept him locked into a path he did not fully want. Snoop's response to that decision was supportive and public. That matters. It tells you something about the values operating inside the household. Cordozar Broadus has navigated her own chapter with remarkable openness, including a public conversation about her health following a stroke she experienced in her mid-20s. She has built a social media presence and a public identity that is entirely her own, while remaining visibly connected to her family. Snoop also has a son, Julian Cordozar Broadus, from a relationship outside of his marriage. Julian has been acknowledged and included in the family structure, another reflection of the choice Snoop and Shante made together to build something wide enough to hold the full complexity of their lives. The home's a real estate portfolio rooted in loyalty. One of the most revealing things about Snoop Dogg's relationship with wealth and real estate is where he has chosen to stay. His primary residence for much of his adult life has been in Diamond Bar, California, a city in the eastern San Gabriel Valley that sits roughly 30 miles east of Los Angeles. He paid $720,000 for that property. In 2026, Zillow estimates it at approximately $2.2 million, a return that reflects both California's relentless real estate appreciation and the deliberate choice to hold rather than flip. This is not Beverly Hills. This is not Holmby Hills or Bel Air, or the coastal enclaves where most entertainment wealth of his magnitude gravitates. Diamond Bar is a middle-class suburban community, gated, quiet. The kind of neighborhood where privacy is maintained not by architectural spectacle, but by ordinariness, by simply not being where the photographers expect you to be. That choice is intentional. Snoop Dogg, with a net worth estimated between $150 million and $160 million, could live anywhere. He lives where his family feels grounded, where the roots are, where Long Beach is still within psychological reach. He has also owned property in Rancho Palos Verdes, the estate where he and Shante held their remarriage ceremony, and has been connected to properties in the greater Los Angeles area that reflect a broader real estate strategy. He has invested in real estate outside of personal residences as part of his overall asset portfolio, though the details of those holdings are managed privately. What the full picture communicates is a man who understands real estate as both identity and investment, and who has never felt the pressure to perform his wealth through his home address. The business architecture, 15 revenue streams and counting. The business portfolio of Snoop Dogg in 2026 is one of the most diversified in the history of hip-hop. Not the most publicly celebrated, not the most architecturally elegant, but among the most genuinely spread across industries that are independent of one another, meaning a downturn in one does not collapse the others. The Cannabis Empire. Death Row Cannabis launched after Snoop acquired the Death Row Records brand and then pivoted it aggressively into the cannabis space. is perhaps his most structurally ambitious business move. The Death Row name, which carries enormous cultural weight in West Coast hip-hop history, was transformed from a dormant music label into a lifestyle brand with cannabis products at its center. The cannabis industry in California generates billions of dollars annually, and Snoop positioned himself early and loudly in a space where his authentic connection to the product, decades of documented personal use, cultural alignment, and existing fan base gave him a brand credibility that money alone cannot manufacture. Media and production. Broadus Films, his production company, has been developing film and television content consistently. He co-founded Snoopadelic Films. His media presence extends to digital content, podcast production, and streaming platform partnerships that generate income streams entirely separate from his recording career. He acquired Death Row Records in 2022, becoming the owner of a catalog that includes Dr. Dre's The Chronic, his own Doggystyle, and a library of West Coast hip-hop that is culturally irreplaceable. Catalog ownership is publishing. Publishing is passive income. Passive income is the foundation of lasting wealth. Food, beverage, and lifestyle. Snoop Dogg has extended his brand into food and beverage with a portfolio that includes partnerships, endorsements, and equity stakes ranging from his own cookbook, From Crook to Cook, to beverage collaborations and restaurant concepts. Each extension is on brand in a way that does not dilute the core identity, but adds surface area for revenue. Sports ownership and investment. He has been involved in ownership conversations around the Allen Wranglers Arena football team. He co-founded esports organization Evil Geniuses through FaZe Clan involvement. He has invested in sports leagues, teams, and platforms at multiple levels, a portfolio approach to sports investment that mirrors the broader diversification strategy. The Olympics and global platform moments. In 2024, Snoop Dogg served as an NBC correspondent for the Paris Olympics, an assignment that was widely described as one of the most entertaining pieces of sports broadcasting in recent memory. He was everywhere, charming, curious, completely himself. And in being completely himself, he introduced his brand to an audience that may have known the name, but had never quite seen the full personality. The Olympics appearance generated enormous amounts of earned media, free publicity worth hundreds of millions of dollars in equivalent advertising value, and confirmed what his business team had long understood. Snoop Dogg is not a rapper who also does business. He is a media personality who began as a rapper and has since become something genuinely harder to define and more valuable to own. The music never stopped a catalog that keeps paying. It is easy, in examining the business empire, to treat the music as backstory. It is not. Snoop Dogg's recording career has been one of the most sustained in hip-hop history. From Doggystyle in 1993 through collaborations with Pharrell Williams, the production work of the mid-2000s, the genre experiments with reggae as Snoop Lion in 2012, and the consistent flow of collaborative projects, features, and releases across 3 decades, he has never stopped being an active recording artist. His feature appearances across other artists' projects number in the hundreds. Each one generates a recording fee. Each one, if the song performs commercially or enters synchronization licensing for film, television, or advertising, generates ongoing royalty income. His own catalog, now that Death Row Records sits under his ownership, combines the artist royalty income stream with the label owner income stream, both sides of the same transaction, flowing to the same account. The streaming era has been kind to artists with Snoop's kind of catalog. Songs from Doggystyle and The Dogfather and R and Gee, Rhythm and Gangsta, The Masterpiece, accumulate hundreds of millions of streams annually across platforms. That is not nostalgia traffic. That is an active, living audience consuming a body of work that has lost none of its original energy. The philanthropy, giving back to where he came from. Snoop Dogg has maintained a consistent commitment to giving back to Long Beach and the surrounding communities that shaped him, and he has done it, largely, without making that commitment a headline. The Snoop Youth Football League, which he founded in 2005, is the most visible expression of this commitment. The league provides youth football programs for underserved communities in Los Angeles and the surrounding area, offering not just athletic opportunity, but the structure, mentorship, and belonging that team sports create in young people's lives. For a man who has spoken openly about how close he came to a very different kind of life, this is not a corporate social responsibility line item. It is a personal mission. He has donated to community organizations in Long Beach. He has funded neighborhood programs quietly, without press releases. He has shown up physically, personally, in ways that do not generate Instagram content, but that communities remember for decades. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Snoop organized and contributed to food distribution efforts in Inglewood and Long Beach directly, practically, in the way that people who understand food insecurity from the inside tend to respond to it. Not with a check written at a distance, with presence. His relationship with giving is rooted in the same authenticity that makes his brand work commercially. It is not performed, it is just what he does. The cultural permanence. Why Snoop Dogg still works in 2026. There is a version of this story where Snoop Dogg's cultural peak ended in the mid-1990s, and everything since has been a long, comfortable coast. That version is wrong. What Snoop has engineered over 30 years is something far more interesting than sustained relevance. He has engineered continuous reinvention without identity loss, which is, in cultural terms, one of the hardest tricks in the entertainment business. He worked with Pharrell and turned into a pop artist. He worked with Katy Perry and turned into a mainstream crossover. He worked with Martha Stewart and turned into a daytime television personality who somehow made that make complete sense. He went to the Olympics and turned into America's most charming sports correspondent. He acquired Death Row Records and turned into a label owner with a stake in his own mythology. At every turn, the thing that made it work was that none of it felt like a betrayal of the original. It felt like an expansion. The core identity, Long Beach, family, cannabis, humor, hip-hop, never moved. Everything built around it got wider. That is a brand management achievement of a very high order. And in 2026, it is still happening. What the legacy actually looks like at 54. In 2026, Calvin Cordozar Broadus Jr. is 54 years old. He has been married to the same woman twice, across a span of nearly 3 decades, who knew him before the fame and chose him again after it. He has 4 children who are navigating their own adult lives with the complexity and the honesty that implies. He has grandchildren. He lives in Diamond Bar. He still drives through Long Beach. He still knows where he came from. Not as a performance of authenticity, but as a genuine orientation. The compass pointing in the direction it was calibrated to point before the money arrived. His net worth of $150 to $160 million is not an accident of talent. It is the result of 3 decades of decisions made in the direction of ownership, diversification, and patience. Publishing rights, catalog acquisition, equity stakes rather than endorsement fees wherever possible. A brand extended carefully rather than diluted recklessly, and behind all of it consistently, quietly, without the credit she is owed, Shante Broadus. The story of Snoop Dogg is not the story most people tell about him. The version most people carry is the 1993 version, the Doggystyle version. The version that is real, but represents maybe the first 10% of what has actually happened. The complete version, the 2026 version, is of a man who took a once-in-a-generation cultural moment and turned it into a 30-year economic architecture, who stayed married to the right person through every difficulty because he was wise enough to know what he had, who bought back his own mythology when Death Row Records came available and turned it into something new without erasing what it was, who showed up at the Olympics and reminded an audience of 100 million people that he is still, in every room he enters, the most interesting person in it. Snoop shows exactly how brand plus assets equals longevity. That equation is not complicated. But executing it across 3 decades, through legal troubles and personal losses and industry shifts and cultural change, while keeping a family intact and a Long Beach address on the lease that takes something that no business school teaches. Drop a comment below on which creator's business model we should analyze next. Because this series is built for people who want to understand how the real money works, not just who has it, but how it was built, protected, and passed forward. Subscribe, leave a comment. We will see you in the next one.